Good evening. My name is Thurman Greco, and I am a reflexologist and Reiki practitioner, and I live in Woodstock, New York, and I have written a book about healing called the Healer's Handbook, and I'm currently working on the 3rd edition of this book. And tonight, to celebrate this book and to celebrate the 3rd edition of this book, I'm going to introduce you to a woman who is going to receive some Reiki, and I'm going to give the Reiki and talk about it at the same time. And I really, I feel kind of adventurous about this because there aren't that many shows where people actually record visually giving or receiving a Reiki session, because they're very slow things, they're very slow moving, and you can go to sleep. You can feel like you have paint drying on a program, but we're going to do it anyway, just simply because very few people have done it. So, like I said, I'm Thurman Greco, and this is Karen White, and Karen White is going to be receiving the Reiki. And Karen White is a Reiki master teacher, and I'm a Reiki master teacher, and we do teach Reiki together, and we've been doing this together for a while, and I've been teaching Reiki for many years. One of the things that we talk about in Reiki is the hand positions. And you know, when I went to school to learn Reiki back in the 90s, we were on massage tables, and people were flat, they were face up, and you were covered in sheets and blankets, and it was all luscious. But then I got out of this environment, and I realized that that's not the real world. And Karen now goes to people's homes and offers Reiki. So let me ask you something, Karen.
Sure.
How often do you go to a house? What percentage of the time do you go to a house and offer to Reiki to someone and they are on the traditional massage table?
Very rarely.
Right. So
When I go to people's houses, it's really hard for me to take the table. If there's stairs, it's hard setting it up. It's just as easy if a person is in a chair. A recliner works fine. A kitchen chair, a chair such as this with arms. I've done it on a log next to the river. So there's no rules.
that's really true, and that's one of the wonderful things about Reiki. Reiki is very adaptive. Reiki will adapt itself to the needs of the person, whether it's on a table or in a chair, whether you're standing in line at a grocery store, whether you're the person that you're offering Reiki to is on a gurney in a hospital. It just really doesn't matter. Right, a wheelchair.
It's the environment. It's the environment. Whatever the environment is, we adapt to it.
And you know, that's very true. I took a class several years ago in end-of-life Reiki, and I teach a class in end-of-life Reiki. And one of the things that we talked about and we had to learn to do in end-of-life Reiki was work with wheelchairs.
Right.
So that, you know, Reiki is adaptable to everything, and I think that's one of the best things about Reiki, because when you receive massage, you have to have a very quiet space, you have to have a very private space, you have to have hopefully some nice music, you have to have temperature control, you have to have a dressing room because the person's going to take off their clothes, and then after the massage they're going to put their clothes back on. And they don't do that so much anymore, but when I learned Reiki many years ago, massage many years ago, we took all of our clothes off and then proceeded to hide under the sheet. But nowadays, people do not remove all of their clothing. And that brings to mind one of the things that I read recently in a Reiki book is that if you're going to give Reiki to somebody, that you want to remove your jewelry, and you want to unbuckle the belts and remove the belts, and you want to take, loosen all the type of, I don't go with that at all. And that's one of the nice things about Reiki. It can adapt itself to your needs. And my needs, because I am a massage therapist, my needs are that you don't do anything like that. Because for one thing, once you are a massage therapist and once you begin to remove things like jewelry and tight clothing, then you go into this massage turf where the person has to be covered with a sheet and the person has to be private. And Reiki quite often is not a private, it's not a private modality. It's actually a very public modality. And reflexology is a very public modality. You can find Reiki in bus stations. You can find Reiki in train stations. You can find Reiki in all kinds of public places.
Hospitals and nursing homes.
Absolutely. And that's why you don't want to remove anything. Because for one thing, if you start taking off your jewelry and you set it down on a table somewhere, by the time your session is over with and you have wandered off and then remembered, oh, I'm missing all these things, then you have to go back and find them, and of course they're not there. And in addition, I don't think that removing jewelry and belts adds anything to the session. I don't think it adds anything to the healing. So that's one thing that I do not teach people to do. And another thing that I do not teach people to do, and I don't know, Karen, we need to discuss this. I don't teach people to float their hands above the body. Very often when you talk to a person and you're talking about giving a Reiki session, they'll start talking to you about, well, you hold your hands an inch or two above the body, and so you never touch the person. And for me, because of my massage background, you always touch the person. You want the person who is receiving your healing to know where your hands are at all times. And that's because that is a very grounding situation to be in. If you are seated in a chair, or you're in a recliner, or you're on a massage table or whatever, and the person who is giving you Reiki is actually touching you, then there are no surprises. And you may not ever think about the fact that there's no surprises, but it's somewhere back in the recesses of your mind. Have you ever received a Reiki session where the person never touched you?
Not completely, but I did have one client who did not want me to touch her head.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and so I would begin and I would hover, and I had another client who did not want me to touch her in the sacral area.
Okay.
And so I hovered. But the rest of both of those women, both of their bodies, I touched all the other chakras, and they seemed fine with that.
Yeah.
I personally have never had the hovering Reiki
Right.
for myself.
And also, one of the things that I think is important is that when you are giving a Reiki session, or any kind of a session, it doesn't matter what the modality is. As the person who provides the service, you've got to be comfortable. The minute you are not comfortable, the minute that you are uncomfortable, experiencing pain, if you've got your shoulder in a funny angle or your elbow in a funny angle, your session is not going to be 100%, because you're going to be on some level preoccupied with this shoulder that's out of place, or this neck that's out of place, or whatever. So you want to be comfortable. And I am not comfortable hovering. I'm comfortable placing my hands on someone. I also, because of that, I do not use any equipment. I know that you run across, in all kinds of modalities, people who use, I don't know what they use, but they use things, tools, and I do not. My hands are my tools, and the healing is. Have you ever received any kind of a body work in which somebody used a tool of some kind?
Yes, I've had crystals, I've had hot stones, I've had some kind of chocolate rub, chocolate and sugar. That was for the skin. And I sometimes use a pendulum in my work. I sometimes to use the pendulum on the chakras to see if they're aligned or not. There are some people who think the chakras should all go the same way, and there are others who think they should go like a gear. And so that can be determined with a pendulum.
Right.
But that's the only thing that I've ever used with Reiki is a pendulum.
And that doesn't really.
And that's not really Reiki.
Right. That's chakra.
That's chakra healing.
Chakra healing, and that also, when you start using a pendulum, that gets you into another realm, which is chakras. I know that when I first started teaching Reiki, I really didn't talk an awful lot about where the chakras even were. I did talk to people about, okay, you're going to hold your hands on the head, and I talked about the 3 different head positions that we could use in order to give Reiki to the head. And then I talked about how careful you have to be around the throat. But it just never occurred to me to say, now, this is your throat chakra, this is your thymus chakra, this is your heart chakra. It just was not there. So in the beginning, when I was teaching Reiki, chakras were considered to be a different from Reiki, a different modality. And at the time that I was teaching Reiki, there were very few Reiki books available, maybe 5 or 6 that I knew of. And I was scouring the countryside. And of course, this was prior to Amazon, but I went into every New Age and every bookstore that I could find, and I really only found 5 or 6 books. Now, of course, there are hundreds to thousands of books about Reiki, but those books at that time did not mention chakras. I do not. Do you have Diane Stein's book?
I don't know that I have it. I know it's at the library.
I wonder, do you remember reading it?
Yes.
Do you remember if she mentioned chakras?
I think there's a chapter on chakras.
Oh, so she did mention.
I've read so many.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and check on that one. Because if you're interested in Reiki, I used to tell people to read Diane Stein's book. And I also would tell people to buy the book by Arjav Petter, because he had, and really only has now, a unique book about where to place the hands on the body for different diseases and different health issues. Because most of the time people just say, okay, you just go down the body. And so that was all I would really talk about. And of course now, you know, the Reiki books are just all over the place. Do you have, how many books do you think are in your library?
You mean in my home?
Well, no, in the Woodstock.
At the Woodstock Library, I think there are 2.
Oh, really?
But that's just Woodstock. If you have a library card, you have access to something like 87 libraries.
Yeah, and there's a lot of books there.
And there are a lot of books out there. So I think Woodstock may have 2 on the shelves, but we have other libraries, the access to other libraries.
Yes, okay.
So we're not lacking for anything.
We really are not. You can if you want to find out about Reiki, you can definitely find out about Reiki. One of the things that we do talk about in Reiki is we talk about you typically begin a Reiki session by working the head first, and I suggest that you start at the head and you work down to the feet, and you give yourself probably 2 to 3 different positions in the head. And this is really important because this is where your different spiritual chakras are located. And this is a very calming thing. And I can remember several years ago, I had an Episcopal priest say to me, "I don't know anything about Reiki. What can you tell me?" She was and of course we had 2.5 minutes or something. And so what I did was I went to her and I put my hands on her head. And that's really all I did for a couple of minutes. And when that was over, she said that is the most comforting thing I have felt in years. So that's where we get started on the head. We start just placing your hands at the top on the crown, and you have your fingers together, although you don't have to. I prefer the fingers together, but it's not, the important thing is to give the Reiki, not to start beating yourself about the head and shoulders about, do I have the right position? Do I have this? Do I have that? The important thing is that you do. And then you hold this position for like 5 minutes. And then for your second head position, you're going to have one hand back at the base of the skull in the occipital ridge and one hand on the forehead. And that's a truly, truly spiritual position. And it's a wonderful, wonderful one. And you can, we have no music here. And the reason we have no music is because I have no idea what is going to be legal to play and what's not. So I just didn't bring anything. But quiet music, I recommend anything by Deuter, Deuter. He has at least 10 CDs out, Reiki CDs. And then I also recommend, and I have had in my career hundreds of CDs. There is a person out there who's been around forever, and he had the first healing music. He was the first one. His name is Stephen Halpern, Halpern. And I recommend those too, although there are many, many different kinds that you can have. Now, when you first start, we've done the 2 positions, and then you want to offer the 3rd position. Don't cover up the ears. You don't want to do that. That's not comfortable. But you can go around the chin and the jaw. That's a wonderful thing to do. And of course, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. We have a thing in Reiki called the Chokurei and the Saheki and the Hon Shaze Shonin. And these are symbols. But when you first learn Reiki, you don't need any symbols. How long were you practicing Reiki before you started using your symbols?
I think I thought I had to use symbols when I first began.
Right, but we didn't have a Reiki wand, so do you remember?
That was just a chokurei.
Yeah. It was not very long. It was not very long. I was introduced in Reiki 1 there were no symbols, and then Reiki 2 there were symbols.
Huh.
And I was introduced to the symbols very early in the game. But in reality, have you ever had a situation where you just did not use the symbols?
Only recently. I've only begun after 11 or 12 years not using symbols always,
Tell me about that.
I was in a situation where it wasn't appropriate for me to be waving my hands about.
Right.
So I took an intention to my heart, and I said the names of the symbols and sent Reiki.
Have you ever had anybody give Reiki to you that did not use the symbols?
Not that I know about.
Not that you know about. The first time I ever received a Reiki session, I was in a spa in West Virginia. And West Virginia is kind of like the end of the world. And I went to this spa and I booked a massage. And then I saw this thing on the menu and it said Reiki. So I booked a massage and then I booked Reiki. And so I went and I got the massage, and she said, I'm going to give you the massage first and then I'm going to do the Reiki. And she did not feel comfortable saying, for whatever reason, because I didn't know her and I don't know, I just it was two ships passing in the night. So she gave me the massage, and then she said, now I'm going to give you the Reiki. And she did her symbols. She used her tongue onto the mouth, the roof of her mouth. But have you ever been called to do a Reiki session and you were uncomfortable doing the symbols, but did you feel like the Reiki session was deficient in some way?
No, not at all.
Not at all, right.
Intention.
Right. There is that rule, intention will get you everywhere. And I've noticed that, when we do Reiki exchanges, we will talk about what is the intention, and sometimes they are just amazing, and you just pick a word and there's not that much to it, and the session becomes truly amazing. So here we have started. We have begun this session with your hands on the head, and then we've gone to the forehead and down to the occipital ridge, and then we're going to the chin, and here we are at the throat. Now, if you will notice that when I first went to this area, I was actually touching. I actually touched Karen's jawline. I was touching around her ears. I was really touching her, but then when we got to the throat, we just didn't. I leave that throat open. You don't want to do anything that is going to upset a person. And when people are upset, one of the first places they're going to show it is in the throat chakra. And I know that after 9/11, for example, the throat chakra was a very, very sensitive place for many people. And here in the last year, the throat chakra has become extremely sensitive. And I'm willing to bet that after the events of this week, that our throat chakras are all very sensitive. Because when you are upset and you cannot discuss it, you cannot talk about it, you cannot share your feelings the way you would like to, it plays itself out in your throat. So this is how we do the throat chakra. I also go along here, and this is not necessarily listed. This is not a beginner session, but what the heck? We're just talking off the cuff. This is the thymus. And the thymus is an active chakra, which is not necessarily found in the books in the pictures, it doesn't necessarily have a color and all of those things, but the thymus it's a powerful basic chakra. And it activates itself in a lot of people. So that's your thymus. And then we go down here to the throat, to the heart. And I will say this, if there's a lot going on in a person's life, if a person is nervous, if a person is sick, if a person is whatever, then I will continue with this open channel, which goes all the way down. So it will include the throat, the thymus, and the heart. And you can stay at these places for 5 minutes each. It's very easy to do. And also, I'll do the shoulders. You know, we are all carrying such weight on our shoulders now in this country. I think the whole planet is carrying such weight. And so it's really nice to offer healing to your shoulders. Now, one of the things that Karen and I do is the books will all tell you that you will, if you're given an hour session, that you will do a half an hour on the front of the body, and then when the person will be laying face up or sitting face up, and then you'll do a half an hour on the back. And we don't do that. We just go with what we've got. And you know, that's kind of the real world. When you're standing, I tell people, and sometimes people are a little disbelieving, but then after they've been attuned, they're not disbelieving after a while. Reiki will activate itself. And the favorite place for Reiki to activate itself is the grocery store line. Everybody is so stressed these days, and all of a sudden you're in the grocery store line and you can feel that your hands are activated. Someone in the line is stressed enough that the Reiki does activate itself. Have you had that experience, Karen?
Yes. Not so much in the grocery, but I used to work at the library. It happened at the library a lot.
Oh, did it really?
Yes.
And what did you do?
Reiki.
I know, but what did you do? Did you?
Sometimes I offered Reiki, sometimes I just quietly sent Reiki.
Right. Just sometimes that's generally what I do. If it's in a public place, I'll just stand there and say, okay, this is what's happening now.
Right.
Somebody in this room needs it. And it's interesting to me that you just said that you will offer Reiki to someone, which means that you know where it's coming from.
Sometimes.
Yeah, I have never had that experience.
Yeah.
I have always had the experience of realizing that there is a person standing within whatever of me, and that person is in need of Reiki.
And then what do you do?
I usually just stand there. I mean, I don't do much. But because the Reiki's activated,
Right.
you know, and I don't know where it's coming from. I did have an experience recently where I was introduced to a woman who was sick, and she was in a wheelchair. And I realized that she was activating my Reiki. It was either her or someone around her, but I figured out, I decided it was her. Maybe it wasn't. And so what I did was I went over to her and I touched her, you know, because feet are safe and knees are safe. So if you run across somebody who is in a prone position and say they are on a gurney, say they are on the side of the road and it's been a car wreck, and say whatever, the knees or the feet are really safe. And you don't have to take anything off. You don't have to anything. You just put your hands out and touch the person, because that's a very important grounding thing to do. And I think anyway, I don't know. Have you ever had this experience?
You mean an emergency? No, I never.
You never have.
No.
I have not ever had an emergency experience that I can remember right off the top of my head, but I have had an experience where I could reach out and touch somebody's feet or their knees or their ankles or whatever.
Well, I usually have a stool that I sit on when I get to the lower part of the body. And so I can just bend over and hold on to the feet. And I like to do the front and the back of the ankles as well, and then the feet. Even with shoes on or without shoes.
Right, doesn't make any difference.
No, doesn't.
It doesn't make any difference at all, does it?
No.
You know, when a person is seated, and this is really important, because if you are thinking about receiving Reiki and you don't know, you've heard somebody gives it or whatever, you don't have to be on a table. You can be in a chair just like this. It's fine. And like I said at the beginning of the show, I went to this woman's house and I had booked a Reiki session. She just threw a sheet over the sofa and that was it. I was concerned about her back because she bent over a lot and I didn't think that was healthy for her. But I also realized, how often does she give a Reiki session? If we're working off the sofa, we're not looking at 7-8 sessions a day. We're looking at maybe 1 or 2. But if you have a person, you can put your hand on the front and on the back as well. Yep, there we go.
There we go.
And I put my hand behind the chair and she moved forward and I moved my hand to her back. But it doesn't have to be. It could have been just the back of her chair as well. And I do know that when I teach Reiki, and I always ask myself, I don't so much anymore, but I do still ask, is this person going to actually book sessions, or is this person just going to carry around the attunement and just use it passively? And either way is successful. There's no positive or negative way to do it. It all works for the good of the universe. And how many people, you've worked at the library, do you know how many people check out Reiki books every week?
I have no idea.
You have no idea?
I don't know. I would guess maybe, I don't know, maybe 1 a month. I really have no idea.
That's interesting. 1 a month is a lot.
Yeah, it seems so.
It is a lot. Now see, we're here, we have started out, we went through the throat and the heart, and now we're down here, we're at the solar plexus. That's okay. We're at the solar plexus. And the solar plexus is where the muscles in the abdomen, and the muscles that come down through the front of the lungs meet. And that's called the solar plexus. And that is a place that carries a lot of stress. And so I really hope that if you have the time, that you can do some time there on that solar plexus. And that's also in the neighborhood of the third chakra. And the third chakra is the one where we experience butterflies. It's the one where we get angry. And we have several chakras that deal with anger. But the third chakra is its own particular kind of anger. How would you describe that?
How would I describe the anger?
Yeah, the third chakra.
Well, I think it's your gut. It's if you have a gut feeling, or if you don't feel well or you get upset, you automatically take your hands
Yeah.
and touch your abdomen
Yeah.
or your head.
Yeah.
If you get upset, usually your hands go right to your abdomen, especially if there's anger, because we are our own healers, and we put our hands in this position because it's comforting and it's healing.
I think that's a very important thing, because now you've brought up, although you didn't do it straightforward, I mean, but you have brought it up silently, really. Reiki people heal themselves.
I think we all heal ourselves. We have the ability to heal ourselves. If you see something that's unpleasant, somebody falls down or something, you say, oh, because it's a natural instinct to
Yes.
touch yourself.
Yes. Yes.
And this is where with the abdomen, when you're upset, your hands naturally go to your abdomen.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's when something is really bothering you, that's where you go. I mean, that's where you're at. And that's also where your abdominal brain is. So that, and the abdominal brain is very, very spiritual, and it's also very emotional. So that's where we go with the second chakra. So the first three chakras are your base chakra, which is at the foot of the spine, and your second chakra, which is about a couple of inches below your belly button, and then your third chakra, which is your solar plexus. And of course, that's, you know, when people start poo-pooing chakras, I tell them, have you ever felt butterflies? Well, yes. Well, that's your chakra, girl, you know? I mean, that's it. So that's how that works. So we start at the top, and we go down, and we now, I'm going to ask you something. How often have you put yourself to sleep with Reiki?
For me, I don't do Reiki at night when I go to bed because I get energized and then I can't sleep.
Really?
I do Reiki when I wake up in the morning. That's when I do self-Reiki. If I do self-Reiki at night when I go to bed, it energizes me, I don't sleep. So in the morning when I wake up, that's the first thing I do.
So and about how long is that session in the morning?
In the morning, I do 20, 25 minutes.
That's a nice session.
Yeah.
That gets your day going
Yep.
in the right way.
Mhm.
Oh, that's a wonderful thing, especially if you think that you're going to have a stressful day, then it will you will be calm. So I think that's a wonderful thing. And so before you ever get out of bed, you start off with your hands on your head?
I start off, yes, I do Reiki. I do mudras and prayers.
Wow. In the mornings.
Yeah, I don't have to go to work. Yeah, I'm retired.
Well, you know, I have to go to work, but I find that I've been getting here in the last year, I have been getting up earlier. I've given myself that extra hour,
Yes.
which everybody thinks I'm, that I really am crazy. That, if I have to leave the house at 8, I get up at 5. But that way I have the time to spend with the Reiki and to spend with myself and to spend, with my, getting my animals their breakfast and walk, and I'm not rushed.
Right.
As opposed to people who get up and give themselves 20 minutes to get out of the house. And, I used to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know how important it was to just get up in the morning and be positive and calm. It helps to arrive at work calm. And people on the roads, And I am not in that crowd. One of the things, have you ever visualized a chakra?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, I think that I'm not sure, the Sanskrit definition of chakra is an energy wheel that turns. And so the 7 major chakras, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,
Yeah.
are these spinning energy wheels. And that's why with the pendulum, I can work with the pendulum and see which ones are going which way and how strong they are. And often I'll do the pendulum on a person's chakras, then we'll do Reiki, and then we go again and do the chakras, and they seem to be more balanced. They each have the same strength. They're either going the same way or they're going like gears, which I haven't seen very often. Mostly they all go in one direction. Left or right does not matter. But I think it's the balancing of the chakras is when say one chakra is just going a little bit and maybe the throat chakra is so much more energy, I try to balance them. So I have visualized them turning and the energy coming off them as they turn and touch each other.
Now let me ask you something. If you have a person that you are working with and you do the chakras, and let's say you find out the 3rd chakra, the 4th chakra, one of them is more energized than all the others.
Right.
And then say the 2nd chakra it doesn't have enough energy or whatever. So anyway, you've got 2 out of balance.
Right.
What do you do when you have 2?
Reiki. I just do a Reiki session on the body, and I touch each chakra area, especially for that reason, to balance the chakras. And I find that when I do a Reiki session, it balances everything, and everything is more like a well-oiled machine. Everything's doing its job. Everything is equal to the other. Because if one chakra, say, is going too strong, it may knock out the energy of the chakra closest to it. I'm not saying it does. It can be that way. That's why I think a Reiki session naturally balances the chakras.
I think that's very true, and I also think that it's very important for us to realize that if you have a Reiki session every week, you're going to have at least give your chakras a chance.
Right.
Because I run across people all the time whose chakras are really out of balance, and they've never had a Reiki session, they've never had anything, and they're going through life, and if they would just give themselves a little chance, life would be much easier. I really feel that way.
Absolutely.
And of course, I don't ever try, I don't know how it is. Do you ever have people who bring up past life issues?
Oh boy. Not at Reiki sessions. I've been in hypnotherapy sessions where there's been discussion about past lives. But I can't say that I've ever experienced past life and Reiki.
That's good. That's good, because then what that tells me is that when people come to you, they're in the here and now, which is really good.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
is,
Well, I think if a person goes for a Reiki session or requests a Reiki session, it's because they're in the here and now and they want to improve that day.
Yeah.
They need that day for focusing and balancing.
And I think when we go into times like we are into now, that people more often than not need a Reiki session. And I know when I first started doing Reiki, people thought that you went and got a Reiki. The feeling that I got from the clientele was, I came here for a Reiki session, but if I want my chakras balanced, I have to get a special Reiki session.
No.
That's not true.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I think that's the job of a Reiki session, is to balance the chakras.
Yes.
And once you can balance these chakras, they may, the life is different for all of us every day. They're not necessarily going to be locked in.
Right.
It's like sometimes people get their auras photographed. I had a woman come to me recently and she said, "Look, I've got this aura. My aura's red. My aura's..." And I said, "Well, I hate to spoil your fun, but I don't question but what it's red, but it was red at the time that picture was taken. Right. Who knows what color it is now? It may be something totally different now." And that kind of bothered her, It was like she had in her mind this thought that everything was like a statue. It was all neat and clear, and everything was just so, and it was all lined up, and it was never going to be any different. And of course, your chakras and your aura are moving minute by minute.
Right. Yeah, I think the first experience I had, which was many years ago, of seeing, I guess it was on television, a camera photographing an aura, was that there were two people together and they had their auras and so and this and that. And they kissed, and as they kissed, the auras turned a completely different color. So what you're saying is very valid. As you move around during the day, your mood changes, what you're experiencing changes, what you see changes, and your aura color changes.
Yeah. And so I would suggest, and I don't do this, when people when they are new to Reiki and they want to book a session, I don't ever, and I should, encourage them to book 3 sessions, book 5 sessions. In reflexology, we definitely like to book 5 sessions. And I just never have. But you really do, I think, because Reiki moves, it's more fluid, that Reiki needs the weekly experience.
Well, if I'm going to see somebody on a regular basis, usually when I begin with them, I do 3 days in a row. And then depending on schedules and whatnot, then I'll do every other day or once a week.
Oh, that's wonderful.
But it depends. Every person, every situation varies, and different people need different things for different reasons. But usually if I'm starting with somebody who I'm going to be seeing on a regular basis, I like to start off with 3. And then we go from there to see what we can do with our schedules and what have you.
Now, do you go to people's homes or do they come to you?
I mostly go to people's homes.
And do you prefer to go in the morning or the afternoon or the evening?
It depends on people. There are some people who like to have their morning to walk their dog and do their yoga or meditation or whatever they do. I like the middle of the day. I like 12, 1, 2. That's when I like to do sessions. This way, a person has done their business, then they can have a Reiki session, because I'm a firm believer of sleeping after Reiki. I think if you have a half-hour Reiki session or an hour Reiki session, it's a very good idea to stay seated or lying down for the next half hour. So if it's a little bit later in the day, then there's a nap involved.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And I believe when you're sleeping, you're healing.
That's a luxury.
It is a luxury, but it's part of the session. If you're doing this to help yourself heal, or it could be anything. It could be just relaxation, just learning to stay calm, or it could be something very serious, like a serious illness. It depends on what the client needs to put into it for themselves. If somebody's working full-time and has children and what have you, and they don't have time for an hour and a half in a day, usually. But somebody who's ill has to have that time because they need that time for healing.
And you know, also, now we have focused today, I've had my hands in different positions on your body, which is what I would do, what I do with a person when they receive a Reiki session. But you know, there's more than just the 7 or 8 chakras that we talk about.
Oh, yeah.
There's chakras all over the place. So how do you incorporate those other chakras in your session?
I don't really do that. I do the major chakras, then I go to knees and ankles and feet. And I really don't think, there are so many chakras. I think it has not actually been determined how many chakras are in the body.
Oh, I agree with you there.
And so I don't really think about the other chakras. And so I start at the crown and I work my way down. And then after the seventh, well, which is the first chakra, then I just move down and go on. I do calves, sometimes I do hands, which has nothing to do with chakras. So after the 7 main chakras, then I don't think about chakras. I think about what, for myself, as I get older, I find that my ankles should be stronger. I don't always exercise them as I should. So I go to people's ankles, depending on how they feel. Before I work on a person, if I don't know them, I talk to them about how they feel, what's going on in their body, what they think Reiki can do for them, or what they would like Reiki to do for them. And then we work each person individually.
I think that's important because, for example, we never talk about the fact that there are all of these other Reiki chakras, and we never really think about it. But you know, I feel that the liver has a chakra. I mean, that's the biggest organ in the body. And it does a tremendous job. When you start reading the anatomy and physiology books and you read all the things this organ does, right away, after about 25 things it does, and you've still got another 400 and something left in the list, right away I begin to think, now wait a minute. What it does all of these things? It's got to have its own chakra. And so I try to, if a person is not well, I try to see what happens to the liver chakra.
Well, I think because you're a reflexologist, you think more about the organs than a Reiki person would.
That may be very true.
And I think that when you offer Reiki, when you get to the feet, you're a reflexologist. And that's that.
You know that's true.
Yeah, I know it's true.
Because when I have a person's feet there,
Yeah.
I start thinking about, okay.
And then you're working the organs.
Yes,
Yes,
I am.
I know that.
We're gonna put this Reiki in this organ, and we're
Yes,
gonna put
yes.
this. That's very true.
I know.
I morph into a reflexologist. Well, I teach a class that I may try to teach once in 2020 called Reiki for a Healthy Back. And part of that class is learning to put your hands on the liver and let that chakra release some anger, because livers do carry anger, and they carry all kinds of problems, all kinds of toxins. And our worlds are so toxic now. And then you've got on this left side, you've got the spleen, and the spleen is an angry organ, and it's big. It's just, you're talking big organs there. So there are chakras there that nobody thinks about. And one of the things that I have learned this last year And anybody who doesn't agree with me is fine. It's okay. You know, we all we all go through these changes. We all come through these moments where we understand a little bit better. A chakra is not a stone. It's not a rock. It's not like a bouncing ball. It really has this turning, which it does, but it also doesn't have much of a shape to it. So when you're working with the chakras, you're not going to have this static space. This space. Your chakra may be going off in another direction here, because that's what chakras do. Chakras visit with one another, and they interact with one another, and they talk to one another. And when they do that, they send out shoots of communication, you know. And I was thinking the other day, how do you describe this? And for me, do you remember those toys that we used to have that they were like springs and they would kind of spring along? Chakras have a tendency to send out springing.
Are you talking about a slinky?
Yes, yes. Thank you so much. You know, because they kind of blow off like that. And then there's another toy that was. We only have 5 minutes left. We're going to run out of time. Listen, Karen, what do you have to say?
Well, it's been a pleasure being here with you.
We always have
And
fun.
it's always fun talking about Reiki and feeling Reiki. I almost fell asleep when you had your hands already on my head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was not something that we intended. It was not something that I tried. It just was.
It happens.
It happens. That's the wonderful thing about Reiki. So if somebody wants to, this year, have a Reiki session and they've never had a Reiki session, how are they going to find a Reiki practitioner? How do you find a Reiki practitioner in Woodstock?
Well, I'm at Karen@woodstock.org. No, woodstock.com. Woodstock.org.
That's a good idea.
I'm at Karen@woodstock.org. That's where I am.
That's good.
That's how I can be found.
They can find you.
Yeah.
Reiki is not, it's not advertised that much.
No, I think if you need a Reiki session and you concentrate on it, some Reiki situation will come in front of you. But I can be reached there, and there are other people that I can put you in touch with.
Yes. And I think we're going to try to have some Reiki classes in the coming year. And we're going to try to have some more Reiki sessions on the air, realizing that it's not that common for somebody to put their hands on somebody else's shoulder and give Reiki, or put their hands on somebody else's head, or to do different symbols on the television. So we're kind of cutting edge here.
Well, years ago, the Reiki symbols were a secret.
Yes.
People would memorize them and then burn the paper they were on. They did not share them. Now, they're all over the internet, they're in books. It's no longer secret.
I think that's wonderful.
Yeah.
We've come out of the closet with Reiki. So I want to thank all of you for watching our program this evening, and hopefully you'll look forward to another program about Reiki in the future. And thank you very much.
And now we're in a brand new decade. Happy New Year.
Happy 2020.
2020.